only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more of North. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk.
Who are we waiting for? We got Pete. Jim. Okay, folks, we will reconvene. I need a mover to seconder that committee adjourned this closed session at 11:10 a.m. Councillor Luke and Councillor Black seconder to reconvene in open session. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now we do have, we had 10 reports that we discussed in closed session. We do have decisions in open session on some of those. And we'll start with the first one. By the way, I think we'll keep going till, what time do you want to go till for lunch? When lunch comes, okay? Because we do have a deputation at 1 o'clock. Okay, and at 1:30 the health board's going to move in. So we'll keep going as long as we can. So the first report we have is staff report ECS 1821. This is the proposed sale of 509 Fishers Glen Road in the former Victoria Scout Hut. And Stephanie, ask you to read that.
Through the chair, the motion is as follows, and looking for a mover and a seconder. That staff report ECS 1821, proposed sale of 509 Fishers Glen Road, former Victoria Scout Hut, be received as information, and that staff be directed to market the property on the Norfolk County website by coordinated advertisements and by posting a sign on the property.
Questions, comments? I have a mover, Rogers, moving it. I need a seconder. Jim? Oliver? Okay. No further discussion. Those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to the second one, staff report ECS 1822. This is the 1120 Bay Street property in Port Rowan. Madam Clerk.
Through the chair, the motion is as follows. The staff report ECS 1822, proposed sale of 1120 Bay Street, Port Rowan, be received as information, and that staff be directed to market the property on the Norfolk County website by coordinated advertisements and by posting a sign on the property, and further that the net proceeds from the sale of the property be credited to the current year's operating budget as a disposal of a tangible capital asset and transferred to the Property Management Services Reserve.
Any discussion? Need a mover? Luke? Seconder? Geisens? Okay, we have a mover, seconder. No discussion. Those in favor of this recommendation? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we're moving on to staff report ECS 1823. Economic increases for non-union staff for 2019. Deputy Clerk.
Through the chair, the motion is as follows, that staff report ECS 1823 entitled Economic Increase for Non-Union Staff for 2019 be received as information, and that Norfolk County Council approve an economic increase for all non-union staff effective January 1st, 2019, as outlined within the confidential staff report.
Any discussion? Need a mover and a seconder. Wells and Oliver. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And now, which one are we on now? Staff report 1829, the collective bargaining mandate for QP, Local 4700, 2019 and beyond. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Through the chair, the motion is as follows, that staff report ECS 1829, collective bargaining mandate for Canadian Union of Public Employees, aka CUPE, Local 4700, 2019 and beyond, be received as information, and that Norfolk County Council authorize the General Manager of Employee and Business and Corporate Services and the Manager of Human Resources and Staff Development to negotiate a collective agreement with CUPE Local 4700 as outlined within the confidential staff report.
Any discussion? Mover? Luke? Seconder? Sonnenberg? Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to ECS 1831, negotiated settlement between the Corporation of Norfolk County and the Ontario Nurses Association, Local 7707, for January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2021. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Through the chair, the motion is as follows, that staff report ECS 1831, negotiated settlement between the Corporation of Norfolk County and the Ontario Nurses Association, Local 007, for the term January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2021 be received as information, and that a bylaw be passed authorizing the mayor and county clerk to sign the collective agreement on behalf of the Corporation of Norfolk County.
Mover and a seconder. Black and Brunton. Any discussion? No? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. Which one are we on? The last one? Okay. Okay, the Deputy Clerk is going to give us an update on one last item.
Through the chair, just for information to the public watching, and that committee received direction and information in respect to the remaining closed session reports.
Okay. Councilor Black. Oh, do we need a mover in a second? No, we don't need a motion. Okay, so we're moving on here. Back to the agenda. We're going to go to 7A. And this is proposed sale of county property. No, that's not it. 7A, right here. Amendments to the recreational facility rental agreements. This is on page 29 of the agenda package. And who's got that report? Mr. Cridlin?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The County Council, yes, CS 1830, amendments to recreation facility rental agreement. It is basically a housekeeping report, I'll say, but it will have impacts on future rentals of our recreational facilities. CSD staff met with the CAO and county solicitor to review all rental agreements, and as we are going through this, we identified two concerns with the present agreements. First, it was identified that a recent change or zoning bylaw change in regards to live adult entertainment prohibits live adult entertainment within 500 meters of a residential area, and this in turn impacts the majority of our rental facilities because they are located within there. There are also other stipulations in the bylaw which prevent live adult entertainment in the said halls. Secondly, in the Human Rights Code, Norfolk County, it's come obvious that we should not allow certain events or allow certain events to be advertised in our rental facilities that are discrimination in thank you, Councillor Black, in matter. So what staff are requesting, or what staff need to do, are change the wording and the processing of our rental agreements to clean up some of the language to ensure that the zoning bylaws respect, and also that no human rights tribunal applications are filed against Norfolk County. So that's the long and the short of the report, and I'll turn it over to County Council for any questions they may have.
Questions? Councillor Wells.
I wonder if Mr. Cridlin might just expand on the zoning for live entertainment. What's he mean that this is not permitted, zoning?
Through the chair to county council. I believe it was in 2016, there was an interim bylaw put in by Norfolk County Council on adult live entertainment. And then in 2017, that interim bylaw was changed to an official zoning bylaw. So in that, there are rules, stipulations, setbacks on where this sort of activity can and cannot happen in Norfolk County. And the unfortunate part is most of the facilities that Norfolk County Council or Norfolk County staff rent out for to the general public, the zoning doesn't, that they're located, so they're have a tough time with the words here. They're not located properly within the zoning bylaw, so these events cannot occur.
Yes, Councillor Will.
If I just could continue on that, and thank you very much for that. If I understand what you have said correctly, this bylaw was passed in 2017. Am I correct on that?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So the event that took place in 2018, in all honesty, should not have been granted permission to take place. Am I also correct on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells, yes. Staff are a little behind the lag time reviewing these lease agreements or rental agreements, and we've caught it now. That's correct.
And I'm not giving the raspberry. I'm just saying that when people complain that they had an extra year and we just have caught up and we have already passed this and we should have not allowed it this year. Because that will always be the question. Well, you allowed it this year, why can't you continue to allow it next year, as an example? So your answer to that would be?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wells. That's correct. When things are changed, there's always new information coming at staff. It takes time to go through. We don't know what changes are coming, where the zoning or other things from the provincial government. It takes time for us to digest and where we move. So in this case, there's been about a pretty close to a year lapse time in staff catching this.
And if I might, just on the second issue was the human rights. Again, could you just explain again why we are contrary to human rights, why we should not allow this in our facilities?
Through the chair to Councillor Wells. Yes, as many councillors know, we have had, I guess, complaints along the human rights lines. As we've noticed, they happen. It's a changing world, and in this case, to discriminate against some of the population and others, that's something that Norfolk County can't do. So even the advertising of such events in a Norfolk County facility and also the activities that have, Norfolk County can't turn a blind eye. We have to have language in place and also a process to go through and sort these out, so we're not going against the Human Rights Code.
Mr. Chair, my last question would be a question to Mr. Crittenden. Thank you very much for that explanation. If somebody wished to host an event somewhere else other than their facilities, would they be allowed to do that? The same event, as an example.
Through the chair to Councillor Wells, that I'm not sure of. As we change the wording in this, staff will work with these groups, and I just can't answer that now because, again, it's zoning. I'm not sure if private rentals would cover these, but with the county solicitor working with staff, I'm sure we can get some answers for these folks.
Thank you very much for that, and as long as we tried our best to help them, then that's fine, and we'll see where it goes.
Any further questions? No. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that's printed. Councillor Black and Sonnenberg. It reads that report CS 1830, amendments to the recreational facility rental agreements be received as information, and that council endorses amendments to the current recreational facility rental agreement template to ensure compliance with all applicable laws, regulations, and legislations, including the Norfolk County zoning bylaw. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we're moving on to the next report. This is Homelessness Prevention Services, Report 1834. Ms. Van Dyke, you're on for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of committee, the purpose of this staff report is to present to Council the results of the RFP 18-01 Homelessness Prevention Service Provider and to seek approval for a temporary 2-year service delivery model that is a hybrid between a hybrid of internal county staff and an external service provider for the emergency housing program. Pursuant to Council's direction, staff issued request for proposal HSS 1801, Homelessness Prevention Service Provider. The RFP opened on Friday, March the 30th and closed on Tuesday, May the 8th. 3 bids were received and evaluated by a committee consisting of myself as the Director of Social Services and Housing, the Program Manager for Housing Services, the Haldimand County Manager of Support Services, and Haldimand County Purchasing Coordinator. For reasons that have been outlined in the companion closed session report, there is no recommendation being brought forward to Council to award the RFP. And as I said, instead, staff are proposing a hybrid service delivery model for homelessness prevention services that consists of a combination of 4 new staff positions within the Social Services and Housing Department and a service delivery partnership with an external partner for the delivery of the emergency housing program. I wanted to take a moment and just walk through the proposed hybrid model. As I said, we are proposing 4 staff positions, 1 program manager, 1 intake diversion worker, and 2 housing support workers. The program manager position would oversee the team and oversee all service delivery partnerships that are funded by the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative, including our domiciliary hostels and the Partnership for the Emergency Housing Program. The program manager position would also undertake the duties related to landlord outreach and mediation that were in the initial proposal that were proposed to be completed by a dedicated staff. Those duties have now been rolled into the program manager position, and the landlord outreach and mediation position is no longer being proposed. The intake diversion worker would field all of the initial calls coming from people who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness, and support agencies in the community that provide supports to individuals experiencing homelessness. They would get the details of the person's situation. They would try to connect them with supports and services to alleviate their homelessness. And if not successful, they would refer the person to the service delivery partner for placement in the emergency housing program. The 2 housing support workers are staff who would provide the necessary supports and services to people who are in the emergency housing program and people in the community who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness in order to identify the reasons for their homelessness, identify the barriers that are keeping someone from being stably housed, and then support them in order to reduce or eliminate those barriers in order to prevent future homelessness from occurring. In the initial proposal that was brought forward, there was also a staff position that was identified for the administration of the Housing Stability Bank. The Housing Stability Bank is a fund that provides assistance to people for last month's rent arrears, utility hookup costs, and utility arrears. In this new hybrid approach, we are proposing that our existing housing resource coordinators within the department would determine eligibility, would receive the applications, determine eligibility for the Housing Stability Bank, and issue the payments. The reason that this was not put forward in the original proposal was that at that time we only had 1 staff working in that role, and that person was working at more than 100% capacity. Through the last budget process, Council approved a 2nd housing resource coordinator, and now that we have 2, we, in consultation with the staff who are fulfilling that role, we believe that this duty could be incorporated into their existing positions. For the emergency housing program, we are proposing that we would immediately issue an RFP for that service only. If we were unsuccessful in identifying a service delivery provider through the RFP process, then we would also, by way of this report, ask for Council's exemption to the purchasing policy so that we could contact our current service provider of that service and negotiate a contract for the same 2-year time period. Staff at the Housing, Social Services and Housing Department at Haldimand County and at Norfolk County Purchasing we have followed Council's direction to issue the RFP. We have incorporated council's feedback when issuing the RFP, and these are the results that we're presenting to you today. We have put our collective heads together, and this is the temporary solution that we are proposing to you. Should that not be accepted, I would request additional direction from council as to how you would wish staff to move forward in order to continue to offer these mandated programs. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your extensive verbal report, and we'll move to Councillor Wells first, then Oliver, then Black.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your report. I know that you've worked hard on this, and usually, as people know, when I stand up and talk about hiring staff, I always ramble on. But with regard to hiring 4 new positions, am I correct?
Yes.
Where is the money coming to pay for these 4 new positions?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Wells, the funding is coming entirely from the provincial homelessness prevention funding.
And have we been receiving this money from the province, and now we're just putting it towards staff, am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. This proposal the staff salaries and benefits for these 4 positions would collectively represent 19% of our total funding allocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that response.
Okay, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question was the one that Heidi just answered, and that was what percentage of the total funding would these proposed positions take up, and you've answered that. Thank you. Heidi, I may have misheard what you said, but with the recommendation, in the event that you put out the RFP and are unsuccessful getting a satisfactory emergency housing service provider, then you're asking for permission to waive our competitive procurement process and contract Dunnville Salvation Army, et cetera, and here's the operative part. I thought I heard you say just now, for the same 2-year period, whereas the recommendation is only until March 19 or 31st, 2019. Which is it?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Oliver, I misspoke. It is for the balance of this fiscal year, which ends March 31st, 2019. And then during that time period, we would come back with a further recommendation to reissue the RFP or present a different service delivery model. So please accept my apologies.
Chairman, I thought I had misunderstood, but thank you. So if that happens, then we will have between now and March 31st to figure out Plan B, and you would come back to council with another proposal. Thank you.
That is correct.
Okay, Councillor Black.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the recommendation contained in the report and just make a few comments if there's a seconder.
Seconder, Councillor Luke, Mayor Luke. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank staff for all their hard work on this, because council really has put staff through the ringer. I think this is the 3rd time it's come back, and I think this is the best format. They've come up with a hybrid solution that sort of addresses the hiring component and the RFP component. I know it's consumed an inordinate amount of staff time, and not just from health and social services, but from our legal support and our chief administrative officer. This is a mandated program. We have no choice but to do it, and it is 100% funded by the program, the CHIPPY program. It's something that's been lacking in Ontario to deal with the homeless, and it's we have that problem here. There's no doubt about it. All we have to do is step out the door and be accosted by some of these individuals looking for money. So we know it's here. And again, thank you for staff.
Okay, Mayor Luke.
Well, Councillor Black has certainly thanked staff, and I appreciate that. They have worked hard. Several months ago, the consultant recommended to this council to hire, I believe it was 8 full-time positions, 7 or 8. It was org code. We received the report. The report very clearly said they didn't believe the services were being provided, and again, respectfully, by the providers that we had that were providing Services. Council turned that recommendation down and asked for RFP. Here the RFPs have come forward. And again, we're in a situation now where unfortunately, the three bidders did not turn out. And so here we have, as Heidi has called it, the hybrid model of hiring four. We know we have to address this homelessness situation that's here in Haldeman, Norfolk, and it's up to us to get on with this. So I think we move forward over the next 2 years with this, do the best we can. And again, as Councillor Black has said, I echo, Mr. Chair, that our upper level of staff have spent a lot of time getting us where we are here at this moment. Let's support this, do the best we can, and see where it goes. Thank you.
Okay, have a mover and a seconder already. Any other discussion? Moved by Councilor Black, seconded by Mayor Luke. And this is the same Health and Social Services Advisory Committee recommendation that was approved there. I'll read it. That staff report HSS 1834, the Homelessness Prevention Services, RFP results be received as information, and that council approve hiring of the following 4 positions within the Social Services and Housing Department for a temporary period beginning October 1st, 2018, or as soon thereafter as possible and ending September 30th, 2020. Program Manager, Homelessness Services, 1 FTE, Intake Diversion Worker, 1 FTE, Housing Support Worker, 2 FTE. And further, that the costs associated with these 4 positions be funded entirely from the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative, CHIPPY funding. And further, that staff be directed to issue a request for proposal for the Emergency Housing Program portion of Homelessness Prevention Services for a contract term of 2 years commencing October 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2020, with an optional 1-year extension on the same terms and conditions as the initial 2-year period. And further, that in the event that the competitive procurement process does not obtain a qualified recommended bidder in accordance with the purchasing policy, that staff be exempt from the quotation and tendering procedures for goods and services outlined in Norfolk County Policy ECS 02 to permit a single source procurement as outlined in Section 484 to execute a service delivery contract with Dunnville Salvation Army Community and Family Services for the delivery of the emergency housing program for a contract term of October 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2019. No further discussion? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to Ms. Van Dyke, Heidi, can we assume that council will be informed of the results of the RFP process that you're including in this recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, call the vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to page 61. This is the 10-year Housing and Homelessness Plan, Year 4 report, 2017. Ms. Van Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to committee, this is an annual report that comes to this council every year to provide you with an update on the results, on how we have been working on meeting the goals and objectives in our 10-year Housing and Homelessness Plan. This was a mandated piece of work that we needed to do in 2013. But over and above that, it really does guide the work that we do in the housing services team. We are required by legislation and by the province to ensure that all of the funding that we spend and all of the projects that we undertake align with our 10-year housing and homelessness plan. On page 2 of the report, you can see the 5 directions, strategic directions that we have in the plan. And each direction has corresponding action items. At the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3, you can see the actions that have been taken on the priority action items this year. We have, some of the highlights are that we have approval for an additional 14 units of seniors housing in Dunnville. Construction will be starting on that project very shortly with funding from the Investment in Affordable Housing Program and the Social Infrastructure Fund. We have streamlined access to the Housing Allowance Program and have been able to open up some additional spaces to offer ongoing rent support for people who are living in poverty and in market rent that they are not able to afford. The Housing Corporation has completed their regeneration study and is looking forward to presenting that to council in the very near future. We have assisted 9 households with down payment assistance in order to be able to purchase their first home. And we have completed with Norfolk County Planning staff a housing study related to the official plan review, and we have connected with planning staff in Haldimand County and look forward to supporting them in their official plan review process as well. The final thing that I would note in relation to the 10-year housing and homelessness plan is that according to the legislation, although it is a 10-year plan, after 5 years, we need to do a more robust review of the plan. And so the program manager of housing services, Ms. Tricia Givens, is working on the terms of reference for that review now, and we look forward to engaging with council about that in the year to come. And Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heidi. Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heidi, we use motels for temporary housing for our homeless. How many facilities in our 2 counties provide that service, and how many people at any given time might be housed in motels?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Sonnenberg. Currently, we have 2 locations in Simcoe. A location, we use various locations throughout both counties. Simcoe, the outskirts of Simcoe, Delhi, and then in Haldimand in the Dunnville area. On any given night, we would have between 20 and 25 people who are staying in the emergency housing program, and over the course of the year, that accumulates to a few hundred that we support in that program. And I would just say that that really is just a snapshot of the population that is homeless in Haldimand and Norfolk counties.
Okay. And Councillor Brunton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Heidi. The occupants of these facilities that, you know, I'm going to go to the Dunnville 14 units on page 3. When they are fully occupied, are they under constant review? And I'm sure they're receiving some form of social assistance and whatever, but are they under constant review to see whether or not they can exit this type of program?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Brunton, at the time that the person rents the unit, they have to meet an income test. So their income has to fall below a certain level. And for a single individual, it's it's in the low 20,000s per year. So you are correct that most of our tenants in affordable housing are seniors whose income is old age security, recipients of social assistance, Ontario Works or the Ontario Disability Support Plan. And we also have tenants that are working, but who are working in part-time jobs or who are being paid minimum wage, who cannot afford, who meet the income test and cannot afford market rent. And those reviews are done annually. And that is part of the required annual report from the housing provider to our office as the service manager.
So is there like a percentage of turnover? Is there any figure that you could give us?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Brunton, that I don't have that information at my fingertips because each of our housing providers does their own rent up every year. So people apply directly to the landlord, and so when a unit turns over, they rent it, they fill it as a vacancy. So I could reach out to our housing providers and ask them what their turnover rate is and present that in a future memo.
It'd be interesting to know that. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very quick question. Heidi, on the highlights listed at the bottom of page 62 or page 2 of your report, 9 households assisted with the home ownership program in 2017. Can you give us a breakdown by county of that? How many were new homeowners within Norfolk County, I guess, is my particular point of interest.
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Oliver, I'm sorry I don't have that information with me today, but usually we try as much as we can to stay as close as possible to a 60-40 split. 60% Norfolk, 40% Haldimand. That can vary a little bit here or there on any given year, depending on what the housing market in each county looks like. But it's pretty much equal between the two counties.
Okay, anything further? Yes, Councillor Sonnenberg.
Heidi, something that's always occurred to me is schools are closing on a regular basis, and I've always wondered if and a closed down school might not be an ideal facility for the homeless. You've got the classrooms already structured, you've got a cafeteria, you've got bathroom facilities. I mean, it's all there. Have we ever considered working something out with the school board and taking over abandoned schools for use by our homeless?
So, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Sonnenberg, there is provincial legislation that gives municipalities, municipalities are one of the priority organizations that can purchase a school once it's closed for use for a variety of purposes. Certainly a school could be retrofitted to into an emergency housing kind of program. I would suggest that it would be very advantageous for us to retrofit a school for permanent affordable housing, because then that provides people with a permanent place to live that they can afford.
Okay, nothing further. I need a mover and a seconder for this recommendation. Sonnenberg and Oliver. Okay, I'm not going to read it. It's printed on page 61. I'm just going to call the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And now we're moving on to page 83, child care funding, year 2 and licensed home child care. Ms. Miranda. Or is it Heidi?
That is me as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, through you to Council and Committee, the purpose of this report is to inform Council of an additional funding allocation from the Ministry of Education for year 2 of the licensed childcare expansion, and to provide base funding for licensed home childcare. The amount of the allocation for the year 2 of the childcare expansion is $466,515. We will, once those funds are received from the province, we will be using that to expand licensed childcare opportunities in our community, either through new spaces or through increased supports for children with special needs to increase accessibility, or through affordability measures to increase the affordability of licensed childcare for families. And that will be so that we are meeting our targets to contribute to the province's targets of 100,000 new licensed childcare spaces for children ages 0 to 4 across the province. Licensed home childcare is an important part of our licensed childcare system. This is where providers work out of their home with a license, and they have access to fee subsidy through our office and other types of supports. Licensed home childcare historically has been funded out of our base funding for childcare and early years, and the province has decided to provide dedicated base funding to licensed home childcare. It is based on the number of homes in your area, and so our allocation for this year is $93,150. We are asking for approval to accept these funds and to sign the service delivery contract with the Ministry of Education so that the funds can flow from the province to the municipality. These are 100% provincial funds.
Questions to Ms. Van Dyke? Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heidi, with respect to the last part that you've just described to us, the licensed home child care, and again, you may not have this number off the top of your head, but how many licensed home child care providers do we have now? And with this additional money, do you anticipate those operators just simply being able to accept more children because they perhaps can hire another staff person? Or how do you envision that $93 being used? How many do we have now, and how do you envision this funding being used to provide more service?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Oliver, we currently have 14 licensed homes across Haldimand and Norfolk County, and that program is administered on our behalf by an organization called Today's Family through a service delivery contract that was the result of an RFP. So the funding is the base funding. Most of it goes to the home providers, but some of it also goes to Today's Family to offset their administrative costs for the program. Licensed home childcare is one of the areas in our expansion efforts that we are really taking a good look at, because we believe that we do have room within our community to bring additional homes into the program. And certainly this funding helps along with that. We can't necessarily add more children to each home. It depends on what their licensing capacity is. So with this funding, if an operator is operating below capacity, they may be able to add more children, but really we'd be looking at bringing more homes into the system.
Councillor Black.
Just want to move the recommendation in the report and speak to it if there's a seconder.
Seconder? Luke? Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Well, just that it is, the funds are being provided by another level of government, so there's no levy dollars here, and an increased level of service for childcare.
Mayor Luke, discussion?
Yeah, I had a question through you, and I don't know if Heidi can answer this. I know I can't, but I'm looking at the province's letter to us on page 87 of our package. I note that May the 8th is the date of this letter, a 5-year commitment to that began in 2017 to increase licensed child care for children ages 0 to 4. This year is the second year in 2018 where we have an increase of 17% over last year. Okay, new government, June 7th. Any feeling if where we're going to be after 2018, or it's just wait and see?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mayor Luke, my messaging to my team has been that we have a mandate from the province and we have a funding allocation. And so we are moving forward to fulfill that mandate with the funding that we've been allocated. And when the province, if the province gives us a change in direction, then we will follow that. At this time, anything that I could say in regards to what the future could look like would be merely speculation.
Thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Moved by Peter, or Councillor Black, seconded by Mayor Luke, and the recommendation there is on page 83. Those in favor of the recommendation, that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to page 93, additional funding for a new registered nurse full-time equivalent. Marlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is to advise Committee of Management that the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care announced on April 19 of this year commitment to the investment of $50 million to hire a new additional registered nurse for every long-term care home in Ontario. So this is to accept the funding for the new registered position for Norview Lodge and to amend the operating budget for 2018 of $53,000. And the FTE will be, for Norview Lodge, will be allocated to direct service to focus on the needs of the residents of Norview Lodge. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Mayor Luke?
Well, I was just, there may be questions here. I was just going to move this recommendation.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward to me, but there may be some questions.
Councillor Oliver?
Sorry, Jim.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one to Marlene. Marlene, how, I mean, we're all happy, I think, to have this report and this additional funding. How long do you think it will take you to recruit a new RN to fill the FTE?
So through the chair to Councillor Oliver, we'll put the request in immediately after next week, and it shouldn't take too long. It usually takes the time frame within the collective agreement to post, and then we'll recruit quite quickly thereafter. So I'm optimistic by the end of the summer or early fall, we'll have a new registered nurse on staff.
Okay, so that was moved by Mayor Luke, seconded by Councillor Black. Any further discussion? The recommendation is there on page 93. Call the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to page 99. This is smoke-free outdoor spaces bylaw signage. Ms. Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is to request from Council $30,000 and budget amendment as well for the implementation of the smoke-free outdoor spaces. As Council will recall, you did pass a bylaw back in February for the smoke-free signage, and this is a supplementary report for that implementation. And with that, Ms. Robinson and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor Black, then Luke.
So smoke-free, does that mean cannabis as well?
Yeah. Medical.
So through the chair, I would suggest not specifically, but any type of smoking would be prohibited in these areas, although it's not specific to the cannabis at this point in time. Any smoke or any combustible materials would be prohibited.
The recommendation in the report?
You're moving that, Councillor Black? Okay. We had Mayor Luke.
Well, Mr. Chair, I read the background here. I'm aware we need the signage, we have the bylaw, and of course you have to have the signage. The amendment is bothering me a little bit, the budget amendment. I guess my question is, do we go to jail if we defer this expenditure until the 2019 budget, or by law we have to have it up because the bylaw is in fact in place? And I'm thinking, there's no sense having a bylaw if you don't have signage, you can't enforce it.
Good question.
Is that fair? I mean, I'm reading this right? We don't
Through
have
the
a
chair,
choice?
that is my understanding.
Okay, and that's fine with me. Thank you.
Councillor Geisens.
Just a question, when you talk about the smoke-free outdoor spaces, is that, I'm assuming that's not only for ball diamonds, soccer pitches, and all those types of things?
Through the chair, so both facilities and Public Works and the Health Unit have been working collectively on this, and I believe there's over 100 locations that we will be putting up the signage.
Can you give me an idea how many, what will be?
Sorry, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't, but I'd like to know at least some of them.
Through the chairman to council, we can certainly redistribute the information that was previously distributed to council with some more specifics in it. Once this report is passed, we'll be able to put together a cumulative list.
Okay, thank you.
Further? Councillor Brunt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Did I miss it there? Did you say it's mandatory or it's not mandatory to put these signs up? Mayor Luke asked that question, correct? And
Yes.
what was the answer?
Yes, go ahead, again, please.
Through the chairman to council, in order to enforce the legislation, it's mandatory that the signs be in place. The legislation requires us to put these things in place, so through a roundabout way, it is mandatory that we put the signs up.
Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg.
I think we already spent too much money on the anti-smoking program, but since it's mandatory, I guess I have to support it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? I got a question, Ms. Miranda. Why was this not included in the budget discussions, the signage cost?
So through the chair to council, we were unaware of what the cost would be at that point in time, and once the bylaw was passed, it was actually in February, so we have worked with our colleagues in other departments to come forward with this proposal.
Okay. Anything further? Councillor Black has moved this. I need a seconder. Need a seconder. Councillor Sonnenberg. Okay. You're taking a big risk there. Those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed. That's carried, thank you. Yes, the food is ready. Do you want to stop for lunch? Okay. We're going to stop for lunch. We do have a deputation at 1 o'clock. Health Board's meeting at 1:30. Okay.